topic for today is love, black on black love, yeah? So I have already played a disclaimer, a kind of trigger warning of sort. But I know something a little bit more detailed about us, right? About I and I, right? And that is, when it comes to love, it's a sensitive subject. And when it comes to romantic love, oh Lord, it's even more sensitive. So, I know a few weeks ago, I was talking about the relationship between Meg Thee Stallion and Steph Curry. Is it Steph Curry? Steph Thompson? Her former partner, the basketball player, the light-skinned brother. And I mentioned the word parasocial because it was clear that there's something about romantic conversations between black men and women who are famous that it ignites a parasocial or elicits a parasocial response. So this is my second warning of sort, but it's more of a soft warning, yeah? I know that the topic of black love can elicit parasocial energy. Parasocial, meaning involving or relating to the connection that someone feels between themselves and a famous person they do not know, who is a character like in a book or a film, in a play, whatever the case may be, etc., etc., etc. So I'm almost saying the live link is open, 07826 115543. Feel free to call in at any time to make your comment, but it's good if you give me 5 more minutes just to set the table. But the table is the phone line is open, and I will be giving it out periodically. And a thing to note is that if you are, somebody that has strong feelings, passions, inclinations, and want to make your point, but live link thing ain't really your thing, right? Then I'm going to invite you to use the live chat, because we have a live chat on the ECR website, Afro Community Radio website. You can give your name or you can give a pseudonym and make your point in the Afro Community chat, ECR chat. And I'll say this: feel free to agree or disagree. I'm just going to ask you just not to be disagreeable about it. That's the only thing I say. So before the show is over, God willing, I want to give out some specific tips and pointers about what couples can do, what each party can do to help them stay on track. Like some of the tips and the pointers from science, from the social science, that don't just give you a fighting chance with your person, but put you in a strong position, because it's easy to take things for granted and move from a kind of conscious awareness in your relationship and your interactions with your person, right? With the spouse, with the other half, with your beloved. It's easy to kind of, life has some rinse elements to it. And when we're put in those situations as human beings, right, we sometimes just go into autopilot where we're not really present. We're just going through the motions. And that is a danger zone. It doesn't mean that you have to be a bad person or be extramarital activity or DV or any domestic violence. It doesn't have to be nothing big. It can be the little things, but on a daily that chew down the love and eliminate the love like ice cube in warm water. It just, it just disappear over time until you say, right, there is no more ice in the water. There's just water. So I definitely want to give away some tips and pointers to take away, but just to stimulate some thought, I ran into some information on Arxa Brothers podcast. It's from a African-American counseling practitioner, licensed therapist, Jeff Sinclair. He has an interesting podcast, and he has some movers and shakers in the podcast world passing through and sharing their thoughts and opinions. And he has a young lady that's his guest, who is talking about some of the gender politics that took place within the US that helped or shaped or pushed the black community in the US on a particular trajectory. Now, there's going to be some people that are saying, Hugh, we're in Britain, we're black British, or we're African, or we're West Indian, but we're not American. I'll give you that. However, I'm aware that also so much influence in the mainstream or in the black community, right, via the arts, the music, the movies, right, or through intellectual discourse or whatever it is, does come through to the UK, right? We never had Black Lives, let's be honest, we never had Black Lives Matter in the UK before America, we had it after. So, I mean, I don't have to be Columbo or Ironside to do the math and show you that, yeah, there's a stream of influence. Yeah, it does go in both directions, but much more seems to come from the US, a bigger population of, African descendant people, right? And they're living in the largest capitalist society, right? With, like I said, Hollywood and the Oscars and the Grammys, etc. So, there's influence. So certain ideas that started out there and had nothing to do with the UK weren't part of the Caribbean community, weren't part of the black community, weren't part of West Indian culture. But then we heard a song called Nothing Going On But the Rent. We heard it in England, and the women started to bob their head to it a bit too much, or they started to skin their teeth a little bit too much. And it was like, then Oprah had a chat show, and it said, oh, men are dogs, or whatever, or certain ideas are starting to filter through to the UK. So I know it's not our thing, but in a way, in an indirect way, some of the stuff ends up being our thing. So here are two people trying to chart maybe what has happened historically in the US. And so likewise, I think it could be at least of interest to us in the UK. And it doesn't mean that we agree with everything or anything, but it's at least food for thought, no?
Plain and simple. That whole long soliloquy. If you don't value and care about black men and what black men have to say, I'm not saying every single black man is a leader. I'm not saying every black man needs to be behind a microphone. There's a whole lot of podcasts that need to close down. I get that. What I am saying is the non-black Marxist feminist whose agenda it was to redefine what family means, to redefine who has authority in our homes, and reshift who has the most influence in our community.
Now, you might be thinking, hey, you gone there already? Like, we're here to talk about love. Yeah, I'm clearing the weeds. I want to do some gardening. We want to do some gardening, but before you can actually start to prune the roses, you may have to chop out some of the weeds and stuff like that. So it is, to make it look pretty, it might be a little bit ugly to get to the nice bit. So that's the context of this conversation.
Same group. When this most recent election happened and DEI came and went, they still checking on y'all? Or was y'all left out to dry? All them corporations. How many times does somebody got to abandon you before they realize they don't really like you like that? You grab to hold to the government, to white feminism, to Marxism, to what the liberal colleges have to say, to what the media say. You are jumping to everything else. You're looking for all other alternatives, but the one that's sitting right across from you. And my view is, listen, I might not be the guy. Y'all may not see me in 6 months from now, for all I know. What I'm suggesting is I'm not saying there isn't a place for women in female leadership. What I am saying is if that's all we have, that's why we are where we are.
So that's one thought or one reflection about what may have or is affecting in some way, right, relationships, black love within the UK is, how are men, black men, seen, like, not just as individuals, but the collective image. And the reason why I really want to nail this down is, this is an example. I was scrolling through my TikTok, as you do, send you all different random stuff. This was a few weeks ago. Arsenal Premiership celebrations, reaction videos. There's a young lady, a black woman. I've seen her face. I don't know her name, but I've seen her on different UK podcasts or live streams or these type of things. She's not famous, but she's like a known face. And she was making the point. She went on to make the point. She put on an extra sensual, sexually charged, seductive voice. As you do, whatever, people make videos or whatever, right? And she made the point. It was a message to black women. And she said that she noticed at the football celebrations, there were black women there, and many of them were with men of different backgrounds. I still thought, oh, interesting. No harm, no foul. But then she made the point. She said, I can't do this because I'm already in a relationship, right? But it went on to articulate a point in the most sexually charged and seductive voice, my interpretation, totally subjective, but my interpretation, to make the point that there were men of different ethnicities with black women, and the men were looking so great and the men were looking so brilliant, right? And that if and her words, this is the quote, and if that YN, which we know what that stands for, right? Young N word, right? If that YN isn't treating you right, then there's Kosovan and Echkovichka, like Czechoslovakia, whatever. She went to name some different places and was, Lord have his mercy and whatever. And I was like, do you know what? You do have to go where you are loved. And yeah, if you're lucky enough to find love, that's your business, whoever your person is. Like, I'm not no racial purist policeman. I'm not here to police who should be with who. But I thought everybody else that she spoke about in high regard of the men of this great stock had a nationality and a flag and an anthem behind them and an ethnic group. But the black men were just YNs. And kind of like knowing what that word stands for and not being just one that pays attention to detail. But as a therapist, I was thinking, like, it's really fascinating. That's how you describe the men of your ethnic group or men of your race, right? The young men of your race as YNs. And I'm thinking, what does that do to the perception, the preconceived perception of how the black men are framed? You know what I'm saying? Like, what other race? I don't know all the other racial derogatory terms, but do women from other groups? I don't know if there's a racial term for like Inuit people. They say if a young Eskimo or whatever, like a disdain for don't play his cards right, then like, does anybody else do that? Like, or is it something to do with? Is it started off in like Black America and certain framing of black men, and it's trickled out in the diaspora, and then how does that show up in black on black love?
Feminism is not only a child of white supremacy, but it is Marxist.
Yep.
It is socialist.
Yep.
And when we get down to the breaking of the nuclear family and how that actually took place, I like to blame second wave feminism in particular.
Why
that
second
took
wave?
place in the 60s.
Okay.
Because that is when Black women really glommed on to something that white women were doing.
Okay.
Not that they hadn't connected themselves in certain ways to like the suffragettes of the first wave of feminism.
Mm-hmm.
Because then we had the Ida B. Wells, we had the Sojourner Truths, and I tell people she wasn't talking to Black men when she said "ain't I a woman." She was talking to Mr. Cartwright about it.
Question: do you have to be a feminist or pro-feminist to support women's rights across the board? Before we even get to race, but women's rights across the board, equal pay, equal access to healthcare, right to make decisions about their own body, etc., etc., access to education, higher education, full integration into society. I've heard some say, for example, that it was needed for feminism played a key role because before 1974 in the UK or in the US or in certain countries, a woman couldn't even open a bank account, right, without a male signatory or something of that nature. But like, it was almost like a child having to ask their parent, but as an adult, as a woman, you couldn't open a bank account. And so there was a need for legislation, things for equal pay and things of that nature. And I mean, that makes perfect sense to me, right? It makes absolute sense for legislation to change and to be given, you know, for all adults to be given the same access to A, B, and C, you know, in the general sense of the term. But do you have to be a feminist or pro-feminist to identify those things as great and helpful? And second point is, sometimes there are those that make the point about patriarchy, and within the context of black men, and talk about patriarchy. Black men weren't on the boards of those banks and were not part of the decision makers that said women can not open these bank accounts or women can now open their bank accounts. Black men weren't part of that patriarchy. So just for the consistency. We're talking black on black love today. We're clearing the weeds first before we get to prune the roses.
Right. About that. And so we know that black women were there too.
Yeah.
But in second wave feminism, the reason, in my opinion, that it took such root then and shot off into the stratosphere and got us to such an extreme point is because there were other socio-economic and political factors going on in the 60s as well. So the 60s was a time of tumult for America on many fronts. And one of the things that took place that I talk about on the channel is a biological, cultural, and environmental shift at the same time.
It's just like a very cool way to prototype extremely quickly. If I go here and figure...
So there's different things going on all at the same time. We're staying with the pruning of the roses. Walk with me. Walk with me. I'm understanding that the volume is a little bit low, so I'm gonna work on that. We're gonna work on that. Technical. Shout out to the engineers and the whole of the ECR listenership and to the ECR family, all of the presenters and DJs dropping them heavy tunes. Rants. Big up yourself.
Shift at the same time.
Yeah.
And I call that a bioculturon, which a shift like that gives birth to a new set of values that replaces an old set of values, whether that's good or bad, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And so when we as a nation, and then we as Black people, were going through this upheaval, a lot of our leaders were being unalived, jailed, brought down, the Malcolms, MLK, all of it, the Black Panthers, all of it. Then the assassination of the president. And then we had second wave feminism in the midst, right wedged in between.
I remember the sister is talking in this context now. She's talking about in the context of the destruction of the Black family, right? There is an argument about the destruction of the nuclear family and certain societal influences, ideas, ideologies, policies by governments, right, that influence the nuclear family, full stop. But there's also that thing which is that has impacted the Black family. So we're talking about things where men are absent. There's been a systemic hobbling, or at least there's an argument for that. The systemic hobbling of Black men. When I say hobbling, I mean the economic hobbling. So when you use sus law, for example. We're talking historically, right? But you're using, no, and contemporary, there's different mechanisms. But let's just use one. We go back in the history, right? Suspicious person, the sus law, right? Young, underage, school age, and young Caribbean, or as we were called back in those days, West Indian young men, right? Boys and young men being stopped by the police and told, right, by the police invoking a 19th century Victorian, like some kind of Victorian law that was made for the vagrants under the Vagrancy Act, right? But that you're acting suspiciously and you was just about to commit a crime, right? So you didn't, but the fact that you were standing at a bus stop, I saw you look at that woman, and that essentially, I believe, right, that you were preparing, acting suspiciously, and preparing to steal that woman's handbag. And for that reason, you are being arrested under the sus law. So there was so many young men being pulled in, tried and convicted, and given criminal records. Did that influence their job opportunities going forward? Did that impact them being a viable life partner with a criminal record and like less access to employment and therefore like a lawful day-to-day revenue? Or the types of work they could get and hold down? Does that affect romance? Does that affect black love, romantic love?
A feminism in the mix, right wedged in between that. Mm-hmm. And then we had things like our black men being suppressed and ostracized out of the job market to be made financially obsolete to their families and their children. And then black women being presented this opportunity to marry the government instead of their men.
Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot. So is she saying that mantra that came from North America, from the United States, that mantra that is heard in societies in certain corners, and particularly amongst one race of people, I don't need no man, might have not really meant I don't need a man as much as I'm really marrying the government? Or where there will be a man in a house that will be responsible for A, B, and C. There's now a governmental infrastructure. There's a collective man. We used to say back in the 90s, Tony Blair, the best baby father in England. Who remembers that? Symbolically, right? Because he was a prime minister. You get it, right? He was a premier and he was a bloke, right? So who was getting benefits, if it weren't from their husband or the father of their child, oftentimes it was like Tony had signed a legislation that gave them access to funds.
We'll give you food stamps, this and that. And people like to dismiss that. Oh, well, it's more white people. That's because it's more white people. Yeah. But we're not talking about white people because it didn't have the effect on them that it did on us. They weren't made to divorce their men wholesale and marry the government. The enforcement was for us. A man can't be in the house. We made movies about it, Claudine. We made all of these things was in our entertainment. It was in our backyard. It was observable reality. It was political front. It was everything. And here you have this idea, funded by the CIA, mind you.
Yep.
Given to women. And
the Counterintelligence Agency. Is that what CIA stands for? Why would they do that to a particular group of people? The CIA. Wait there. The war in Vietnam, and there is a influx of heroin within the African American community. The war against the Nicaraguan Contra, if my memory serves me well, there's an influx of cocaine into the United States, which is processed, and hence the emergence of crack cocaine. Another thing that destabilizes the African American community. some people say, some commentators from in the Black American diaspora say, man, that's chemical warfare against the people. We're here in the UK. We saw what happened. We saw what happened when the crack cocaine came to the UK. So it's not America. We're not the same. But we got a lot of similar. There's a lot of similar social or social economic vulnerabilities amongst the poor and working class in both black communities. Similar vulnerability. So when crack cocaine came on the scene and some young men saw it as an opportunity to make revenue, to make themselves economically viable, to excel, right? Young men that didn't push themselves in education or didn't have those the cultural capital to have men that mentored them and got them into trades or into professions, right? So they could be economically viable in a lawful way, found their shortcut, snakes and ladders, right? Took a bit of a Bengal lancer, he's a bit of a chancer, right? And saw it as an opportunity to make money, right? But as our elders told us, was sweet nanny go to go running belly in it, like you licky and you nyammy, right? What is it like that Native American tradition, the Inuit people up in the Antarctica, the people that they used to wrongly call Eskimos, but they're Inuit people. They there's a wolf in the area, he's a competitor, right? And so to eliminate the competitor, they put the knife or sharp blade in the snow, and they leave a little bit of it protruding, and they pack it around with snow so it's firmly in place, solidified in the ice. Put a little bit of blood on it. The wolf smells the blood. The wolf comes and licks the blade, thinking that he's licking the blood of food, but then he cuts his tongue. He don't know that he's cut his tongue, so he keeps licking the blade until he licks the blade, and it bleeds, and he licks and he bleeds until he dies. He died, basically bled to death. But he thought he was he thought he was helping himself, and I've heard it used, that analogy used as the young man who thinks when he sells the Class A drugs that he's bringing resources into the community, but he don't know that he's dying on his own blood. He's licking a blade and dying on his own blood. And that's what happened here in the UK. Did that affect black love and black on black relationships? And so that young people now who are coming of age or have come of age and are of parents and marriageable age or whatever, and their parents or their uncles or their role models, did they see some of that going on, or some of that dynamic filter down and affect black love? We're still cutting the weeds. We're going to get to the pruning of the roses. The number is 07826 115543. Feel free to jump in and make a comment, ask a question, or share your perspective. Or share your perspective in the chat.
Given to women and targeted to black women for the numbers. Right?
Steinem and all of them. Yep.
Steinem and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
To say you don't need men. Now they didn't start with saying you don't need men.
I've been doing research. I saw the flyers. They were saying it at the beginning.
Touche.
Only, and I want you to finish this, what you're saying. Only because when you look at those old flyers and you look back and saw that there were more women that were against feminism.
Ranks makes a point. He says in the chat, this is deep. Only the truth will set you free. Most of the younger generation are fully ignorant of their history. The boys kill each other and the girls hate themselves and each other. They hate their reflection in the mirror, hence why they take up with anything. That will be true for so many. Not all. We know not all. We got outstanding examples of young men and women. Like, we know that. We have to put that as a disclaimer. But there is a critical mass that text from Ranks really does apply to, and that's truth.
first coming up, there were more anti-suffragists amongst women than there were women that were for it. So there was a little bit of that, where even then they weren't against it just for the sake of we don't want to vote. They were against it because they saw it as anti-men and family.
It was anti-male, it was anti-family, and it was anti-women.
Yes.
This is the point that that I have been talking to the women about. Feminism is not just anti-male. It is anti-woman.
Yes.
I'm not going to get into the whole diatribe of that because I've done complete shows on that. But to your point, there was a bit of we don't need men. I don't know that Black women immediately glommed onto that part of it.
They didn't.
But we eventually went there, real kind of quick, fast, and in a hurry, because the main component of that was making our men financially obsolete from us, jailing them, incarcerating them, and just generally systematically suppressing them. I ran across a quote from Fannie Lou Hamer, and she was like, I don't need to be liberated from my man. I had a husband, and he's 6'4", and he's 250 pounds, and he protect us, and he take care. I don't need to be liberated from mine. So to have a voice like that say, no, we're not going with that. Liberate us from what to what? Take us from what to what? And I'm gonna try to wrap it up because this is such a deep topic. It's got so many nuances and layers that we can talk about, but we only got a small amount of time to talk about it. When we talk about it destroying the Black family, when you tell women that in essence, they don't have to be women anymore, that not only do they not have to be women anymore, that it is of low quality and low status wifehood and motherhood and being the helpmeet to your husband.
Apologies, I missed out on some of the earlier interactions in the live chat, but shout out to Q for the shout out. Sister A had mentioned about the case with the babies. It wasn't the first LGBTQI couple. It's not the first case, not the first barbaric case. But yeah, Grand Rising to Black Love as well. And appreciate your interactions and taking them into full consideration. But yeah, keep them coming. What's your thoughts on this analysis from the Ask Your Brother podcast?
The helpmeet to your husband and being of service in your families. We've gotten to a point where we ridicule Big Mama. Big Mama was stupid. This is why it ain't no family reunions no more. Because we had big mamas and big daddies when we was doing family reunions. And we respected them. Even though they may have had their issues or this and that, they were the glue that was holding us. No, y'all got to come over here. I'm cooking. And we gonna eat, and if some members in our family fall out, then that's just what we gonna do. We do fall out. Now, this cousin don't talk to that cousin, and this auntie don't.
And that's truth, though. We do still have to come together as family, and we use that word family like family, Black community fam, but like literally in our biological families, we still have to come together, even if brother A is still vexed with brother B because my brother $3,000, and he said he's gonna pay me back at Christmas, and we're all in June now, and I ain't seen my money, so I'm vexed. I've been for that. I don't want to go there and skin teeth, but you have to go to mommy's house and go and eat chicken or whatever. Even if you don't eat laughy, you can't give it a wide berth, right? You can't cut the blood tie. So yeah, families have problems. I'm just using that money thing as an example because oftentimes it's things can be related to things like that, but it could be anything. When I say politics, right? Passa or mix up with your siblings or with family members, but still you can't isolate yourself. You're part of something bigger than your own ego, right? And we have a duty, and there's something called there's something that exists you say in sociology, for example, like or anthropology, like tribal unity. So it doesn't always, things ain't always based on because it makes me feel good. That's why I take part in it. Do you understand? There's a name for things like that, and it's said to be bad for your health, where things you just do by yourself that makes you feel good. It's not ideal. Like, life is interaction. Life is social, right? Don't make the matrix turn us into silos, right? We got to keep up the blood tie.
This cousin don't talk to that cousin, and this auntie don't talk to that uncle.
Yeah.
Everybody has their issues. I'm not saying we never had our issues, but we still had a sense of togetherness, and we got to make some type of family. I find, and I wonder if you find it as well, Mr. Jeff, that not only are we dealing with feminism on its face, but it has bred this sense of individualism also. Not only do I not need a man, I don't need anybody. And I can sort of do everything on my own. Do you feel that feminism has bred this sense of individualism, or do you feel that those are other factors?
Before we get to that, let me ask ECR family if you can give me a shout in the chat or on the WhatsApp if the levels are better, if the levels are improved, because this is an important message. This is an important conversation that we want to have today, and we want to make sure that the people can hear it loud and clear. The live link number is 07826 115543. There's a number of points that the young lady has met or they've been made in this conversation, right? And we've got to the point of individualism. That's anti-African. And when I say anti-African or alien to African cultures, I'm talking about people originating in Africa, wherever they may have lived for the last 300 years. So when I say anti-African, I'm saying that's not Black American culture, individualism. That's not Caribbean culture. That's not West Indian culture. That's not the culture of the Africans in Central and South America. Or it might have become, it might be becoming, we might have evolved into that in our different ethnic groups, but that's not our natural way. Think about our families even coming to the UK, and we're thinking about the Windrush generation. So that's not no antiquity. That's hardly antiquity or ancient history. That's like in living memory, right? There's people from that time that are old people now, but they're still alive. What do they say? They came to this country, no dogs, no blacks, no Irish, trying to get a loan or trying to get themselves together financially because they can't find suitable accommodation. But I've got a room, so you can come and stay in it. We split the money. Like, there was a share and share alike type of thing. Or oh, you've got a better job, so you're moving out. All right, well, I'll stay back and I'll start to handle the full bill or whatever the case may be. Oh, you guys want to buy a house? So what if I throw my little tuppenny, or what do you call it, shilling? I don't even know the money. I'm too young to remember that old time money. So my older brothers and sisters talk about it, but I honestly don't remember spending no shilling or nothing. I ain't that old. I'm from the digital. I'm from the what do you call it again? The European Union, the decimal, not the digital, but the decimal age, right? We're dealing with no shilling and that, but they saved their pennies, so to speak, in a partner. And then people was able to get enough funds to put down on a house and then start to pay for their own house. Or even if they were on low income wages, they bought 3-bedroom houses and rented one room downstairs to a couple who were just up and coming, right? Or to a bachelor or something like that. Brought the bill down, right? So the share and share alike, the partner, the chipping in together, right? People tried to go to church. The white clergyman saw them, pulled them aside at the end of the Caribbean people, pulled the old West Indian church people aside at the end of the English church service, let me put it that way, and say it's lovely, and the pastor says to them, or preacher man, dog collar said, it's lovely to see you this week. But, you know, it's not me. I like you guys, but some of my parishioners they feel a little bit uncomfortable. So, I mean, we can all love Jesus, but can you just, can you just not love him here? Can you? And so what do the elders have to do? They have to go and rent a little community hall, get a little tambourine, sing a one hymn, and out of that, you get the birth of the black church in the UK, right? Self-funded, right? If the elders could do that for the church, I don't see why the Pan-Africanists can't do that. I don't see why the black nationalists can't do that. I don't see why the Afrocentrics can't do that. I don't see why the cultural nationalists can't do that. One coca full the basket. If I'm lying, tell me I'm lying. Press gas.
Of individualism, or do you feel that those are other factors?
I definitely think it was a huge component. I do think capitalism by default naturally will manifest over time with people kind of prioritizing themselves, their immediate tribe. I think capitalism by default will lead people naturally in that direction. But I agree with you 100%. Honestly, I look back and I was like, okay, so that was the Trojan horse that they snuck within the community. And then when everything was finally revealed, before we realized it, everything was destabilized. The women are hating the men can't fulfill their roles in terms of provision. The women are feeling like, well, you know what, I don't need you. I got all these other options now of how to provide for myself and my children, and these children are now mine, not yours. And now our marriage is really between me, you, and the state. But I would argue that out of all those different things that we're listing, the facet of feminism that I actually am becoming much more interested in and learning more about.
So here's the argument. Here is the argument, or one form of analysis. We have male leadership in societies or in communities. Before we get to oppressive or not oppressive, but just using descriptive as in, like, I'm not using it in the leftist sense. I'm using it in a more generic sense of male-led, right? Patriarchy, right? Cool. Or you have female-led, right? Different reasons.
It's a sexual liberation movement.
Yeah, you have different reasons, right? But you have female-led, or different parts of Africa, different parts of the world, female-led. Cool. No oppression, right? Neither in the terms I'm using them represent symbolically oppressive. But then you have something else, which is called a gynocracy. And that is when it's the government and outside agencies that support and endorse and manipulate factors that emasculate or eradicate male authority, male presence, male importance. It's very different. Patriarchy, matriarchy, I'm talking about something different from a gynocracy.
There's a book that I've been going through, The Case Against Sexual Revolution, A New Guide to Sex in the 21st Century by Louise Perry. And she has an interesting critique of feminism and how, like you just said, it's actually been the very thing that's caused the most issues for women now today.
The sexual revolution, I think Louise Perry calls that the sexual argument against the second sexual revolution, because she contends that there was one in the 1st century, and she gives evidences for that in pre-Christian, I think it was, pre-Christian England or Britain. So she gives reasons for that. But Jeff Sinclair and the Crimson young lady, that her name is Crimson, I think raised some interesting points. Yeah, bit of food for thought. I want to catch you after the break where we can chop it up and interact, and let me get your feedback and your perspective on what you heard. If it makes sense, you identify with something, or you think, you know what, they took it a little bit wide and it's more than appropriate what are the changes that have taken place, right? Or they're inevitable, right? Maybe we just need to get with the times and adapt, right? And our love will be much better and much more fruitful. Or is there somewhere that we can meet in the middle or create a better understanding, and where both men and women, black men and black women, can have a deeper respect and move from respect to love, move from love to like reverence, right? Move from love to adoration.